Onstage, Onstage, Channel Time. Onstage, Onstage, Channel Time. Onstage, Onstage, Channel Time. Onstage, Onstage, Channel Time. Time, and Jim.
Tonight, we welcome Sonoma County's own Roadside Bombs to the stage of the Phoenix Theater. Collectively, this group has an incredible punk history, and we're thrilled to have them on this show. Tonight, we'll explore what drives these men, how they've channeled that into their music, and later, they'll play a collection of songs. Please welcome to the program, Roadside Bombs.
Roadside Bombs.
How's it going?
Thank you.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Thanks, you bet.
Oh, boy. Not to date or age anyone, but have you ever done the math collectively on how many years of punk rock this band has under its belt?
Wow. Yeah, no, a lot.
Do we think it's over 100?
I think 100 might be pushing it, but it's pretty damn
not
close.
that far.
No?
I don't think so, man.
This guy here, he's got 35, so I'm.
Yeah,
that's a
Ben, you were-
number
Yeah, you're right.
to add to the number.
Over 100.
I got 20, and we're young
Bitch.
over here. And
Yeah,
you guys
absolutely.
were-
I got about 20 plus.
Wow, that's where we're starting this thing?
Eric, you've been playing here for how many years?
It's a reality check.
On this stage,
Yeah.
I would say over 25 years,
yeah, over
almost
25.
almost 30
And
years
I know the
now.
same with
playing on
Ben.
the stage.
Probably 30
I think
years.
you guys,
Yeah,
we got
close
some
to 30
randoms
years.
in the house, and holy cow, we got some time on this stage.
Some people would argue that this is a Sonoma County punk supergroup.
Some might.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be me, but some might.
Some might.
Yeah.
There's people from all, I mean, you guys have been in all sorts of different bands,
Yeah.
and if you've watched any punk rock shows in the last 20 years here, you've probably been to one of your guys' shows, and that's a remarkable thing. So it's cool to have you here tonight.
Thank you for that.
I think the best place to start here would be, and I know the story, but the others maybe don't, if you wouldn't mind telling us what you guys were doing early October
Oh.
Yeah.
and how life changed and what happened, because I think it number one, it shows like this band has real momentum in a way that a lot of bands don't. Not no disrespect to anybody, but you guys have done some really incredible things, and you were doing an incredible thing, but then everything kind of changed.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. So we were on tour at the point in October. We were
Releasing our new record, Rise Up.
right to promote the new record, and we were in Spain. We actually had our first day as off. We had like 2 days off. We're sitting on the beach in Catalonia. You know, things were good, and then we had to put it all together to go back to the next show, and it was probably midnight here when we got on the road. And time on the road gets kind of boring, and everybody's just kind of flipping through the internet and whatever. And I saw a headline that said, California town, like hundreds of houses burning, blah, blah, blah. And then it said Santa Rosa. And I was like, holy shit. I mean, actually, I think the headline said California town Santa Rosa burns. And so I kind of mentioned it to the rest of the guys, at which point we had made it all the way into France to our next show. On our way to the next show, and within an hour, we had news that Jeremy's house had burned down with our practice space.
Right.
His family was evacuated in a matter of moments.
She didn't have much time. They rode by at like 1:30 in the morning. Over the loudspeaker, you got to go. And she managed to grab the animals with two of my sons that were home, and they left within 15 minutes, and the house, the studio, everything was gone within 2 hours, if that.
Yeah, we were actually calling people in the States and letting them know that the fire was like. I was driving, so I had Ian, who was co-piloting. I had him call my son, woke my son up out of bed, and was like, "Why are you still home?" And he says, "Like, what do you mean?" I was like, "Sonoma's on fire." He's like, "What are you talking about?" And I could hear him on the phone. He walked out onto the deck and looked out and just was like, "Oh shit," And so then we basically had to, from that point, we had to make the decision to come back. We had another, 5 or 10 shows to do.
Right.
And, but, there was no way we could be gone for that, And so then we had this epic journey of dropping these guys off at the airport, and then
It was like
taking
an 18-hour drive
Yeah.
to the airport, and then
Yeah.
a 12-hour flight home.
to take, and then taking care of all the loose ends that we had going on there. So we had the van, and we had the equipment and all that stuff,
Merch and everything.
so I stayed with my buddy Ian, and we went through and dropped off all the equipment and returned the van, and spent another day and a half where we were getting, we were just getting word here and there, like, okay, we talked to all our family and stuff, and so far they were okay, but nobody could say, what was going to happen next, and so yeah.
Anybody who lives in Sonoma County, it's you don't even need to describe what happened because
Yeah.
it'll never forget it.
Yeah.
But to anybody who wasn't, it was like a dystopian, traumatic end of the world experience. And I bet
Absolutely.
anybody, you guys especially, being away from it, and obviously, it's something you'll never forget. And I'm sorry to bring it up right off the bat, but I just think it's
fine.
one of those things where. Talk about a contrast, I
Yeah.
mean, this band is on tour with Harrington Saints.
Yeah.
One of you is wearing a Harrington Saints shirt tonight. You were.
Until I sweated it out.
And you were on such a high, and then this thing
Yeah.
happened in the midst of such a crazy political year, which has infused this new record of yours.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about like this perfect storm of craziness that went on.
It just did. None of it seemed real. None of it seemed real. I was talking to my daughter when I was away, and she's like, "You just don't know where the fire is. It's just everything is smoke." Well, you were here. Everything was smoke. Everything is glowing, and we were just like, we have got to get back as soon as possible. And it was, it came back, and of course, by the time we got back, it took us, me anyway, it took me like 3 days to get back, and by which point most of the stuff was, if not under control, at least people had a grip on what was really going on.
But what an epic journey coming
Yeah.
back. And, how many houses do we know? Does anybody know that
It's like
statistic?
6,200 or something like
6,200,
that.
just to give the scope to people who
Yeah.
didn't live here during
Yeah.
that. Unbelievable. I
Yeah.
think 50,000 people were evacuated.
Yeah.
It just is unlike anything that I think any of us in our lives had ever experienced.
And hopefully never again.
And hopefully never again. And I bring it up right off the bat because you've released this album, Rise Up, in this crazy political era that we've been in, and we'll talk about all that.
Sure.
But what you kind of see happening is you have like national and internationally, you see just like bad news, left and right. But then you come back to this community, a community. How long have you all lived in Sonoma County? A lot of your lives?
Yeah, 40 years.
Long time.
Yeah.
So supportive.
Yeah.
Everybody's watching each
Yeah.
other's back, and it's a really interesting contrast to live in because it feels like everything is fucked.
Yeah. I think-
in the world, and then
Yeah.
and then you come back to a place where it feels like people are taking care of each other.
I think you had it right. I think the world is kind of fucked, but at the same time, I think a lot of that just is because you get all the snippets of shit off the internet. The internet has this amazing way to funnel down and filter out all the good stuff and just kind of feed you all the shit, and I mean, there's no doubt that we're in a a time that's, I mean, there's a lot of, it's turmoil, I mean, on any, by any other definition, it's like, it's the most tumultuous time that I've ever lived in, but I think that it's important to remember that, really you live in the community that you're in, right? I mean, so like what I really witnessed was I witnessed the good in people. When I got back, it was like everybody was, making runs down to pick up supplies and dropping them off. And like, people that, if I was doing my identity politics, if I was online and I saw them pop up, I'd like, oh, you're a Nazi or this or that, But really, we see him on the street, I'm like, oh, that guy's helping out too. It's this weird identity, thing that we get behind, like we have to pick a side all the time. I honestly think that, that's the people are good, and this was a really good, I don't know, it's just a really good showing of that here in the county. I mean, the county really
I
came
saw that
together.
firsthand with all the help that we had gotten throughout. We're still getting help from people. I mean, just that first week, we had people coming out to the beach houses we were at and just bringing us stuff, and it was just stuff we didn't really ask for, but they were just coming. They knew we needed this, we needed that, and it was there.
Yeah.
And strangers, which was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good reminder because you guys put out Rise Up, and this is the new 2018 Roadside Bombs album. And it documents a lot of stuff that I would say you're frustrated about
Sure.
in terms of what you've seen. And so it is nice to sometimes get a reminder of the good.
Yeah.
Because in the last year, it has not always been apparent about how much good there is.
No, it really hasn't. It really hasn't. I mean,
yeah, I don't know if you had more to say on that, but
well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the list is
Get out the
so
manifest.
long.
yeah, you said you joked about having a manifesto. You wanted to share with us during the performance.
I'm working on the manifesto.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's on the record. I mean, really, my thing is just simply that it's the rich and poor. The divide between the rich and poor has just become so vast and so apparent and so flagrant. It's like it used to be a deal where, you know, they kind of fed us this idea that you really could, and not even an idea, it was the truth. If you worked hard enough, you could reach a point where, you know, you could retire and you could own your house and you could get out of financial insecurity, and these things would actually happen for you. And people in our generation, people, you know, people coming up now have no real expectation that that'll ever happen. I mean, you got, if it's not a 2-income family, it's only because it's a 3-income family, because you can't, you know, at least in California, it just doesn't happen anymore. You know, like one breadwinner, you know, give me 2 examples of that off the top of your head. You know, it just doesn't happen. And it's kind of and really it's all about greed. You know, it really boils down to greed. It's nothing else. It's not anybody smarter. It's not it's not even education, because you used to be able to, with a high school education or less, you should have a vocation. You could go out there, you could work in a factory, you could swing a hammer, whatever. And that stuff, even though it was a commonplace job to have, it would still pay your rent.
You could get paid for it.
You would get paid for it. Yeah. And now it's just like, you know, there was a thing the other day, you know, I only read it, so the numbers could be skewed, but basically, you know, they said that 82% of all the wealth created in the last 12 months went to the top 2% of people in our society. 82% of everything new. That means 82% of the raises, 82% of the profits, 82% of the expansion in the economy, all went to 2% of the people at the top. I mean, how do you cut the rest of that up? How do you keep living on a smaller chunk of the pie year after year after year after year? I mean, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
And you, in your lifetime, have really seen a shift. I mean, it wasn't great when you were a child necessarily, but it's definitely gotten exponentially worse.
Exponentially worse.
It seems like in our modern day, punk rockers, artists, comedians are kind of like our philosophers. You know what I mean? People look to bands like this and people that are speaking truth to kind of find words for them, or to kind of be channel what they're feeling into a way they can connect. And that's the great thing about music, is people can come to your show and it's an accessible way. If you were just to get up there and do a spoken word about your feelings on income inequality, less people would probably come than come to a Roadside Bombs show.
Sure.
So it's a very interesting platform for you guys to have. Not only do you get to, you know, have this cathartic experience of playing rock that's fun, but you also get to like channel your frustrations and kind of have a platform to speak some truth.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about the rest of these guys, but I think all the greatest bands in history, the greatest rock and roll based bands, so punk rock bands, whatever, they've all had had something to say when they got up there. I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, we're just a little, side project for our regular workaday stuff, you know, really, when you think about it. But, you know, when you give somebody a microphone, you know, you have to think about, well, are you just going to fart into it, or are you going to say something, you know? And so, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to sound like, you know, we're any sort of philosophers. I just kind of write the stuff. We don't even, generally speaking, when we write music, we come to the practice room with nothing. We just come walk in the room, you know, and maybe whatever hit with the news that day is what's at the very tip of my mind, and somebody's got a riff or something.
Riff, and then we just take it from there.
Just go from there.
Thank God you got something to say, because none of us would know.
Yeah,
we just want to play music, and you got some shit to say, so have at it.
Well, a good example of what you're talking about. You talk about income inequality, which seems like that might be one of your big passionate objections to how the world has gone.
Sure.
And you say, well, how do we allow that to happen? How does society go in such a way? And so you have a song on the new album called War on Love. War on Love. You have a great video about it, and would you like to share a little bit about what's behind that song?
War on Love is just, obviously it's a song about, people's right to be with whomever they care to be with, for the most part, people will say that's a gay marriage or gender equality or whatever it is. But for me, it's just like you should be able to be with whomever you want for whatever reason you want. Nobody has any right to your time. It's like or right to be intrude in how you want to spend your time and your life and your emotional currency.
Yeah, and the reason I bring it up is that issue, that whole idea of scaring people about other people's private business, was used in a pretty effective way to distract the populace, to make people get divided, to hate each other for very dumb reason, but effectively. And yet we've made so much progress on that front. But what I think has been really unfortunate about the last year is all these battles that we thought we'd made so much progress on, that we'd won, that a lot of people stopped feeling passionately about. We're seeing it being eroded away. And we're seeing that like you fight for a cause.
It's the Hail Mary of the old white man is what this administration is, what this last I think this is the last push of that whole generation, that whole way of thinking. I think they were able to muster just enough support and just enough hatred and anger to get one last
Hail Mary, what's got to happen, though? There's got to be a really strong defensive end out there to knock that ball away.
Absolutely. I mean, because there's a population out there that's ready, because of the income inequality and the wages never rising and opportunity decreasing. There's a populace out there that's ready to hate. They're ready, portions of it anyway, that are ready to be angry and ready to hate and ready to say, oh, well, to blame and say that was the problem and those people were the problem and things like that. And I think that without, it's certainly something that could, that could get a whole lot worse without, like you said, a good defensive end. Good backfield here.
We've got to be quick and nimble, I think, still. The game is still in play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just remarkable to see the erosion of progress in a way that I think a lot of us in our adult lives are kind of shocked about. And so this album, Rise Up, do you think that this album would have come together the way that it did without the election of this president?
Not. Well, maybe without the election, because most of it was written during the campaign. So but without social media and without the daily back and forth of of one side bashing the other and the, like you said, the way that the social media was manipulated, the way we were manipulated through social media to one against the other. I don't think the album would have come together the same way without all that.
What do you define as rising up? I mean, you call the album Rise Up.
I'm not one of these. I'm not one of these revolutionary types. I think the no level of anarchy is what I'm talking about. I just mean that listen, we've stood by and not participated, and by not participating, this is the outcome, and your rights are being taken away. We are making huge backward steps in the progress. I mean, civil rights movement, the gay rights movement. We have an openly white supremacist president of the United States. I mean, there's just no other way to describe him. So, to me, I'm not advocating any form of rebellion other than it really does matter to get out there and either run for office, you got to vote, that part, You know, I mean, just like
Work for a candidate you want
work
to
for a
support.
candidate you want. Make sure that you're not letting somebody, because if you're not speaking, somebody's filling that void.
Yeah.
Somebody is speaking for you. If you don't vote, then the guy who votes against you is voting twice. Is the way I look at it. You know, so you know you gotta engage. If you don't engage on some level, and you know, not everybody wants to punch a Nazi in the face. I mean, some people do. Some people do.
Yeah.
But there's a whole gradient there. You know, there's supporting candidates who oppose, you know, all this austerity and all this shit. You know, there's ways to make it happen. You know, and you got to be there.
I think an interesting discussion could be that Tom Gaffey is a natural-born anarchist.
That's true.
You
I am
believe in
an
anarchy.
Yeah.
This is a man that does not believe in anarchy. So what is your full-throated defense of anarchy?
Yeah, I'm not. My defense is that it's something I was born with, and I've just always felt that way. No man has the right to determine how another man will live. If that other man wants to live and have some level of comfort in food and housing, it would be wise for that person to live in the system he's living in and make that work.
Sure.
So anarchy, I think, in a thoughtful way, can actually work well. But it has to be a benevolent form of anarchy, and people need to work together. Certainly you can, and we're seeing more and more of it out on the streets. We're seeing homeless people consciously making that decision to be homeless. And that's a form of anarchy. They are out there doing it on their own.
Yeah.
And in doing that, in many ways, they're breaking many laws, and they are going against society themselves. It's working for some of them and not working for others.
Sure.
There's a form of anarchy, but I got to say, one of my other favorite forms of anarchy at a time was a band called Hood House.
Nice. Now, why is that?
Nelson Mandela.
What was Hood House? What was Hood
White
House?
courtesy telephone.
Oh my
please.
God! Almost every show they played was almost like anarchy on stage.
But what
There's a difference between a riot and anarchy.
Let's give some context.
is that a deal?
Hood House was.
It was an early band that I was the lead singer in.
Okay, which I think is a good lead-in for the question. Anybody at the table, but perhaps you specifically, because you were in Hood House.
Sure.
How have your personal causes that you feel passionately about changed over time, or have they largely remained the same?
I can tell you from so if you go to this record, like as any 20, I can tell you I would not have written War on Love at 21. You know, I don't think I had the emotional insight to do so. Like we've been, it's been almost universally accepted. I live in Northern California, you know, but I have got a lot of people come up and pat me on the back and say, "Wow, what a brave move to write a song openly talking about, you know, the right of gays to marry."
People really quickly forget what 10 years ago looked like, what 20 years ago looked like.
5 years ago.
But it's a brilliant and wonderful development that it's not acceptable to, say something that's bad is gay, or to throw around a homophobic term. But
Absolutely.
when you were a punk and a teen, it was very acceptable, and people forget that. Not to say that it was right, but just in that punk scene, a punk scene that's thought to be very progressive.
It was very white and straight. I mean, there was without question, there were, it wasn't, only that, but like, especially when you come from a punk scene that isn't out of more or less a small town, a couple of small towns. I mean, this was a very straight white scene for a long time. And even, that was never something that I never believed in that as a virtue, but it was something that it gave you the parts that you did want, along with the stuff that you didn't. So, we would, it's funny because as a young punk, you were always called a faggot, like, I mean, that was a daily thing, walking around in this small town like this. They just assume if, that's what they'd say. And then keep put on top of that I like to align myself with the non-racist skinhead movement. That combination of those two and it was it was a weird place to be. And it was a weird place to be for sure. Yeah.
And you're open to learn. I think that's the coolest thing about where you're at now is, you know, you want to talk bravery. It takes bravery to say, look, I used to act and think this way, but I don't anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of the time we like to, pardon the phrase, whitewash our record.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
act like we always knew
Sure.
the right thing to say and we were sufficiently open-minded.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, a lot of us, especially over a certain age, were not.
Yeah.
Because that was just the world that we grew up in. By
Well,
no-
I mean, it
you
was
know.
it was a difficult thing to like outwardly, you know, even explore the idea that, hey, it's, you know, you just couldn't. It was hard to be to I don't know. It was hard to differ. It was hard to be on the outside. It was hard to like express an opinion about something like that. Like people would always come up to me as a skinhead. They would always say, "So what? So you're a skinhead? So you're proud? You're racist, right?" I'm like, no. I'm like, you know, I'm not actually. And they're like, "Well, you're proud to be white." Yeah. I'm like, well, I guess, but really, I'm just, you know, I'm trying to have some pride in who I am at this moment. It doesn't have anything to do with the identity of being white or whatever. And so we'd fight, you know, and that's how that always would work out. You'd come up with a reason to fight those guys, you know. I mean, that's how it always worked. Right over there, sometimes over there, a lot of times back there.
Back parking lot.
No, in the
when
dressing room.
And when you say those guys, you mean people who are trying to give you trouble?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of racist skinheads in and around the Bay Area in the early to mid '80s and the early '90s. Not so much. Once right around 1990, things started switching up pretty good.
It did.
But I used to fight a lot of those guys, and I wasn't like the sharps do now. It's not like, you know, I knew that I had this moral high ground and like it was us against them. It was just those were the guys trying to beat us up for being weirdos because we weren't on their side, you know. You're like, well, if you're a skinhead, you got to be with us. Well, no, that ain't going to work. So...
If anybody out there is confused as to sharps and skins and all that, go listen to the resilience episode. We went really deep into it on the resilience episode.
There you go. Yeah.
Album ends with Election Day. What is the vibe of that song?
It's just basically it's about the morals and values that we have always said, and the idealism that we have always said that this country stands for, and the fact that, you know, that is not what being put forward in the current narrative when it comes to, you know, the current politics, the current, you know, stance on immigration, all of that stuff. It's like we've always said we were inclusive, even if it was bullshit a lot of the time. We've always said it, at least. And now we're just like, no, we're not letting they're not going to let people in from this country because of their, you know, because of their ties to terrorism through their religion. It's just it's something that we've always at least given lip service to, the fact that, hey, we're an open and free society. And now we're just going like, nah, fuck it, we're not doing that anymore. Like we don't let your type in here. You know, doors are closed. You know, maybe if you come from the right, you know, Northern European countries or wherever Trump buys his wives or whatever, it's a different story. But if you know you're, I mean, from before the campaign even started, with they're coming over our borders and they're sending rapist shit. I mean, he's a goddamn white supremacist. You know, I mean,
And it gets to the point, if it keeps moving in one direction or the other, eventually people like ourselves wouldn't be able to get over the border.
oh, absolutely not. Absolutely
Just
not.
for the way we believe and talk.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, you know, I since we don't sit around as a band very often and have political statements, so since I'm answering a lot of these questions, I mean, I don't, you know, I'm not just assuming to speak for all these guys. They're just, you know, you asked me, I wrote the song, so
Yeah.
you know, if they have any differing opinions, you know, I still love them. So
I just wrote a
we
really
usually
good
don't.
guitar riff.
This
That's all
guy's
I
pretty
did.
pretty spot on.
Yeah, I got nothing, Ben. Just keep coming
Yeah.
up with stuff
Yeah.
and talking. I got nothing.
all right, fine, no, good enough.
You have any closing thoughts on anything, Mr. Gaffey?
It's been a good show. I've been waiting for this one, actually, because you guys all mostly have been playing here for quite a while.
Yeah.
And welcome back.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Well, thank you all for joining us tonight.
Yeah,
this
thank
is
you very
a special band for anybody who's been a punk in Santa Rosa for the last 20 years, and it's really special to record on this very stage an episode that is with people who've had a 30-year history in this building, and that's remarkable. So it feels special, and I'm really grateful that you guys came and did this with
Well,
us.
thanks
So
for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
That was great.
Thanks a lot.
And in just a moment, we get to see the culmination to this point of all your musical journeys as Roadside Bombs plays a set of music. Thank you again for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
Right on.
Thank you.
Later.
Thank you.
We've always carried your burdens on our back as you made your ascent. We put in our time and many could and died. Others waited unemployment line. It's time for that tyranny to end. And tonight we'll rise on our own to the top of the world. And brothers will lend a helping hand. And we'll rise up as one. We'll let our flags unfurl. Every woman and man, rise up and fight. For way too long now we've waited on our turn. And you say it's all gonna trickle down. But with every deal, you know you're lying still. You pull the scabs and the wounds won't heal. The drums of rebellion will sound. And tonight we'll rise on our own to the top of the world. And brothers will lend a helping hand. And we'll rise up as one. We'll let our flags unfurl. Every woman and man, rise up and fight. Poor people gonna rise up and get what we deserve. Poor people gonna rise up, we're gonna take what we have earned. Poor people gonna rise up and our rights we will defend. Poor people gonna rise up, that tyranny will end. Poor people gonna rise up. Poor people gonna rise up. Poor people gonna rise up. Poor people rise up, rise up. We'll rise on our own to the top of the world. The brothers will lend a helping hand. You will rise up as one. We'll let our flags unfurl. Every woman and man, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, Kids at school play ball and jump rope. Hey, I'm stuck in a sack of no faith.